11:47 p.m. Washington, D.C., the White House Situation Room. The air is thick with tension so dense you could cut it with a combat knife. 14 of the most powerful people on the planet sit around a mahogany table bathed in the cold blue glow of classified screens, empty coffee cups, untouched sandwiches, loosened ties. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs hasn't blinked in 4 minutes. On the wall-mounted display, 154 red targeting indicators pulse over Iranian territory, like a digital death sentence waiting for a single word to become reality. Each red dot represents a Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missile, already programmed, already targeted, already loaded in launch tubes aboard 6 destroyers and 2 submarines sitting in the Persian Gulf right now. The question hanging over this room like a guillotine blade is not whether America can destroy these targets. That answer is already known. The question is whether America should, and the next 6 hours will determine whether 154 missiles turn Iran's military infrastructure into smoldering archaeology, or whether diplomacy pulls the world back from the edge of a conflict that would reshape the Middle East forever. What you are about to witness is not a battlefield engagement. It is something far more terrifying. It is the inside of the room where the most consequential decisions in human history are made, where generals present kill chains, where intelligence analysts brief casualty projections, where the President of the United States must choose between restraint and annihilation. Welcome to the most intense emergency overnight meeting in modern American history. Do not look away, because what happens in this room tonight will echo for generations. Before we dive into the details, let me know in the comments which country you're watching from. Now, let's get to it. Everyone thinks that military power is decided on battlefields, in the skies, on the seas. They're only half right. The most dangerous room in the world is not a cockpit or a combat information center. It is a conference room where exhausted men and women with access to civilization-ending weapons must make decisions in real time with incomplete information and the weight of millions of lives pressing down on every syllable. Here is what the world doesn't understand about how America goes to war. The decision to pull the trigger on 154 Tomahawk missiles is not made by admirals or generals alone. It is a brutal collision of military necessity, intelligence analysis, geopolitical consequence, legal authority, and raw political will. The Iranian regime believed that their latest provocation, a coordinated attack on U.S. assets in the region that left 3 American service members dead and 14 wounded, would be met with diplomatic protests and economic sanctions, a catastrophically naive assumption. What they didn't account for was the cold fury of a National Security Council that has run out of patience and a president staring at casualty reports bearing American names. Tehran thought they knew exactly how far they could push. They were about to discover that they had miscalculated the breaking point by exactly 154 missiles. Arrogance doesn't just cost lives on the battlefield. Sometimes it costs entire military programs, decades of infrastructure, and the permanent destruction of a nation's capacity to project force. Here is the central question that will define American foreign policy for the next decade. Do you launch 154 Tomahawks and permanently cripple Iran's military infrastructure, or do you hold the trigger and risk projecting weakness that invites the next provocation? There is no clean answer. There is no option without consequences. In the next few minutes, we're going to break down the military calculus behind the strike package, target selection, damage projections, and escalation risk. The political framework that constrains even the most powerful military in the world. The intelligence picture that drove 14 decision-makers into a room at midnight. And the engineering behind the Tomahawk Block 5 that makes these 154 missiles the most precise instruments of destruction ever built by human hands. This is not theory. This is the anatomy of a decision that sits at the intersection of power, responsibility, and consequence. Drop a comment with your country, because what happens in this room tonight doesn't just affect Americans. It affects every nation on Earth. To understand why 154 Tomahawks are sitting in launch tubes tonight, we need to rewind the clock 72 hours. 3 American service members, Army Rangers attached to a counterterrorism task force in northern Iraq, were killed by Iranian-backed proxy forces using advanced weaponry that could only have come directly from IRGC supply chains. 14 more were wounded, 3 critically. Within 6 hours, Signals Intelligence confirmed what everyone in the intelligence community already suspected. The attack was not a rogue proxy operation. It was sanctioned, equipped, and directed from Tehran. The National Security Advisor briefed the President at 6 a.m. the following morning. The briefing lasted 11 minutes. The President said 4 words when it was over. "Prepare me options immediately." By noon, CENTCOM had delivered a tiered strike package. Tier 1, surgical strikes on the specific IRGC facilities involved in planning the attack. 14 targets. Low escalation risk, limited deterrence value. Tier 2, comprehensive degradation of Iran's ballistic missile program, Revolutionary Guard infrastructure, and naval assets in the Persian Gulf. 87 targets. Significant escalation risk. High deterrence value. Tier 3, complete destruction of Iran's military offensive capability. 154 targets. Maximum escalation risk. Permanent deterrence value. The President studied the packages for 3 hours. Then he scheduled the emergency overnight meeting for 11 p.m. Every member of the National Security Council received a single instruction: bring your honest assessment and your conscience, because both were going to be needed tonight. 11:52 p.m. The briefing begins. The Director of National Intelligence takes the floor first. The intelligence picture is unambiguous. Iranian fingerprints are on every aspect of the attack that killed American service members. Satellite imagery shows IRGC logistics convoys delivering the specific weapon systems used in the attack to proxy positions in the 48 hours preceding the strike. Signal intercepts capture Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders discussing the operation in language that removes any doubt about state sponsorship. Human intelligence assets inside the IRGC confirmed that the attack was personally approved at the highest levels of the Iranian military establishment. The conclusion is clinical and devastating. This was not a mistake. It was not miscommunication. It was a deliberate act of war against American personnel, planned and executed with full Iranian state authority. The room is silent for 12 seconds after the briefing concludes. Then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs stands up and places a laminated target sheet on the table. 154 facilities. The sheet is color-coded. Red means destroyed in the first wave. Orange means degraded within 48 hours. Yellow means pressured into operational paralysis. Looking at that sheet, every person in the room understands the same thing simultaneously. If this strike is authorized, Iran's military capability will be set back by a generation. The Secretary of Defense presents the military case with the cold precision of a man who has thought about nothing else for 72 hours. The strike package is designed for maximum degradation with minimum collateral damage. 154 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles hitting 154 carefully selected targets. Ballistic missile production facilities. IRG, Sea Command and Control nodes. Naval base infrastructure. Radar and air defense networks. Underground weapons storage complexes. Each missile carries a 1,000-pound warhead guided to within 1 meter of its intended impact point. The probability of achieving complete target destruction, 94%. The probability of unintended civilian casualties if strike protocols are followed, less than 2%. The strike window opens at 3 a.m. local time in Iran. Maximum darkness. Minimum civilian presence at military facilities. The military case is airtight. Now comes the harder conversation. The National Security Advisor lays out the escalation matrix. If America strikes, Iran has 3 realistic response options. Option 1. Absorb the strike and de-escalate. accepting the military setback as the price of miscalculation. Historical precedent suggests this is the most likely outcome when strikes are decisive and overwhelming. Option 2. Limited retaliation against U.S. assets in the region, accepting the risk of a further American response. This leads to a degradation spiral that Iran cannot win. Option 3. Maximum escalation, including attacks on regional allies, attempts to close the Strait of Hormuz, and activation of proxy networks across the Middle East. This is the nightmare scenario, the one that keeps people in this room awake at night. The probability assessment. Option 1, 62%. Option 2, 31%. Option 3, 7%. 7% probability of regional war. 7% of a scenario that could kill thousands and destabilize the global economy. In any other context, 7% sounds manageable. In this room, it sounds like a coin flip between order and catastrophe. 1:15 a.m. The arguments intensify. The Vice President speaks first after the briefing concludes. 3 Americans are dead, 14 are wounded. If we don't respond with overwhelming force tonight, we invite the next attack. We invite the attack after that. Restraint without consequence is not diplomacy. It is surrender, written in American blood. The Secretary of State pushes back. 154 missiles will ignite the region. Our allies in the Gulf are already nervous. The diplomatic channels are still open. Tehran sent back-channel communications through Oman 12 hours ago, suggesting they want a way out of this escalation. Give diplomacy 48 more hours. The CIA director cuts through both arguments with a single sentence. Our intelligence suggests Iran has 2 more proxy attacks already planned for the next 72 hours, and they believe we won't respond because we haven't responded decisively in the past 3 incidents. That changes the mathematics of waiting. 2:03 a.m. The President speaks. For the first time since the meeting began, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces rises from his chair and looks at every person in the room individually before speaking a single word. The room holds its breath. His voice is quiet, controlled, every word precise. He lays out his thinking with the methodical clarity of a man who has spent 72 sleepless hours wrestling with the weight of the decision before him. He acknowledges the legitimate arguments on both sides. He respects the intelligence. He honors the counsel of every person in the room. And then he delivers his conclusion with the finality of a judge reading a verdict. The back-channel communication through Oman will receive a response, a 48-hour window to present a credible de-escalation framework with verifiable commitments. During those 48 hours, the 154 Tomahawks remain in their launch tubes, targeted, programmed, and ready to fire within 15 minutes of a single order. But they will not fire tonight. However, and this is not a concession, it is a warning. If the 48-hour window produces no credible framework, or if a single additional American is harmed by Iranian-backed forces during that window, the strike package is immediately authorized with no further meetings, no further deliberation, and no further opportunities for diplomacy. The message to Tehran is simple. You have 48 hours to prove you understand what happens next if you don't. The room exhales, but not with relief, with the exhausted tension of people who know that the decision made tonight is not an ending. It is a pause. A loaded pause measured in 154 missiles sitting in launch tubes waiting. This is not fiction. In January 2020, following the killing of General Qasem Soleimani, the real White House Situation Room operated in exactly this manner. Emergency overnight sessions, tiered strike packages, escalation matrices, diplomatic back channels running simultaneously with military targeting. The decision-making process described tonight is validated by declassified after-action accounts, insider memoirs, and congressional testimony from participants. The machinery of American military decision-making is as sophisticated as its weapons systems. The people in that room are not cowboys. They are the most experienced national security professionals on Earth. You're wrestling with the consequences that extend far beyond any single strike package. Let's spotlight the hero mechanism of this scenario, the Tomahawk Block 5, the precision instrument that makes restraint credible and decision-making consequential. Range, 1,000 miles. Accuracy, within 1 meter of the intended target. Warhead, 1,000-pound penetrating high explosive. Speed, 550 miles per hour. Sea-skimming flight profile, virtually invisible to conventional radar. When 154 of these weapons are sitting in launch tubes aimed at your military infrastructure, the credibility of American deterrence isn't theoretical. It's arithmetical. The Iranians know what those missiles can do. That knowledge is precisely why the 48-hour diplomatic window has meaning. An ultimatum backed by nothing is a request. An ultimatum backed by 154 Tomahawks already programmed with your addresses is a deadline with consequences written in steel and fire. 2:47 a.m. The meeting adjourns. 14 people file out of the Situation Room into the pre-dawn corridors of the White House. The 154 missiles remain in their tubes. The 48-hour clock is running. Somewhere in Tehran, back-channel phones are ringing with messages being delivered in the careful diplomatic language that means, this is your last opportunity to choose correctly. And in launch tubes beneath the Persian Gulf, 154 Tomahawks wait with the infinite patience of precision weapons that don't care about politics or deadlines. They only care about the coordinates already loaded in their guidance systems. Here is the brutal truth that every adversary of the United States eventually learns. American restraint is not American weakness. The decision not to launch tonight is not a victory for Tehran. It is a 48-hour loan with catastrophic interest rates attached. Every hour those missiles stay in their tubes is an hour Iran's military leadership should be spending on their knees thanking whatever they believe in that the men and women in that Situation Room chose process over impulse. Because the alternative, 154 simultaneous impacts across Iran's military infrastructure, was 15 minutes away from becoming reality at least 4 separate times during the overnight meeting. 4 times the conversation came within a single presidential word of authorizing the strike. 4 times the weight of consequence pulled the decision back from the edge. That is the terrifying reality of American military power. It is not the weapons that make it formidable, although those are incomprehensible. It is the discipline to hold those weapons ready while simultaneously pursuing every alternative. It is the ability to sit in a room at 3 a.m. with casualty reports bearing American names and still ask, is there another way? Because when that answer finally becomes no, when restraint has been exhausted and diplomacy has failed and American blood has been spilled one time too many, the 154 missiles stop waiting. And when American Tomahawks stop waiting, military infrastructures stop existing. That is the lesson of tonight. That is the message written in the red targeting dots pulsing on the Situation Room screens. That is the cold mathematical reality of challenging a nation that can destroy your entire military capability while its president is still drinking his morning coffee. Either Tehran delivers a credible framework and the missiles return to standby status, or they don't. And the world wakes up to 154 simultaneous explosions reshaping the Iranian military landscape permanently. What do you think? Did the president make the right call giving Tehran 48 hours? Or should the missiles have launched immediately? Drop your country and your honest assessment in the comments. This is the debate that defines the line between strength and wisdom in the use of American power. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because this video is not over. Victory is ours.